It's a warm welcome here in our studio in Serekunda. This is Star TV News with me, Sarah Kamara. In the headlines tonight, the economy was in a better shape during Jammeh's era, says former Secretary General Mamadou Sabali. None of the GFF executive members knows football more than me, claims Ibu Silla. Media Council of the Gambia to hold Gambian journalists accountable. And on the international scene, biggest foreign currency earner hit by COVID-19. Netherlands reopened with strict social distancing rule. Press freedom violation reported at US protests. Those were the headlines, and now the news in details. The former Secretary General, Head of Civil Service Mamadou Sabali, on Monday shed light on issues currently affecting the country's economy, indicating that the economy was in a better shape during Jammeh's era. He made this revelation in an interview with our reporter Modu El Baji.
The advent of the Barrow's administration was expected to be like what many describe as the defining moment for the actualization of the nation's dream for economic development. But the Barrow-led government have been overclouded with criticism both on economic mismanagement and corruption. Meanwhile, the former Secretary General, Mamadou Sabali, an economic by profession, also joined the list of those critics on the Gambian government, especially on the economic sector. Mr. Sabali expressed his perspective on the current economic situation, alleging that the economy was in a good shape during the reigns of Yaya Jammeh than the current government.
I think what I can tell you, the economic situation is not too bad. But if you juxtapose it against your proposition about the amount of money that the EU allegedly injected into this economy, it's not reflected in our economy. It's not even reflected in our balance of payments or in the livelihoods of the ordinary Gambian. Generally, from what I can observe from statistics as well as public sentiment, the economy was in a better shape when Yaya Jammeh left it than it is today.
What do you think is lacking our economy to be in this situation?
Well, I think it's a general lack of competence, knowledge in the field of macroeconomic management. Central bank, I must admit, the competence is quite good, but they missed the track a little bit. They started getting too excited about pleasing the political class and the public with certain statements and decisions like crashing the interest rate on treasury bills, which has serious macroeconomic consequences. I just saw today in the front page news items that domestic debt is still rising. This is a conundrum that we'll have to figure out, because if you crash out the interest rate and you're claiming that you are fiscally responsible, why should the domestic debt increase? So in the times of the Ministry of Finance, I think one of the worst things that Barrow ever did was to appoint Mambure Njai as finance minister. Mambure has completely rubbished our economy from that excessive supplementary appropriation bill that brought an outcry in the country to the subsequent boneheaded decision to increase salaries by 50%, which I actually warned them was going to have serious macroeconomic consequences in terms of inflation. That happened. Inflation is rising. The tax issue led to the closure of Julbrew, which cost us jobs. If a government cannot create jobs, it should not destroy jobs. So these are the issues. I think Mambure's presence at the Ministry of Finance and his incompetence has inflicted irreparable damage on our economy. And the sad thing is, whichever government comes to succeed Barrow, you'll have to work to undo this damage.
However, Sabali also gave a piece of advice to the Barrow's administration, and he further alleges that the resources that should benefit the masses have been diverted.
For President Barrow himself to open his eyes and watch his ministers and directors, I think they are pillaging our resources left, right, and center. It's quite an open secret now that Barrow's ministers are competing in building story buildings in Dakar. And the resources that are coming, especially that are supposed to benefit the farmers and the poor people, are being diverted. You know, the farmers in this country have become worse off under Adama Barrow compared to the Jammeh era. So what needs to do, I think Barrow should fire Mambure Njai, get a competent and honest and straightforward finance minister. That will help a lot. But also Barrow himself has to watch these ministers and hold them to account. Barrow cannot sit down and say he's appointed ministers and he'll watch them, trust them to run the economy. If Jammeh did that, Barrow would not even have received a proper economy, but he received an economy that was, by and large, not too bad. But what Barrow is doing, and the criminal overtures of his lieutenants is going to leave this country in very bad shape.
Mamadou Sabally stated that the flamboyant lifestyle of the Barrow's ministers and the rampant corruption breathing within the system swept away his desire of serving the current government. However, the government spokesperson, Ibrahima G. Sankare, was contacted for comment, but he declined. Reporting for Star TV, I am Modu Elbaji.
The people of Wuli and Basse in Upper River region have expressed their gratitude and satisfaction to President Adama Barrow for the construction of the Basse-Yorobawol Road. Mati Senghor sent in this report.
Mr. Bahore Drame, a native of URR, said URR was neglected by previous regimes for 52 years, especially Wuli and Sanduk, which were abandoned, but thanks to the government of President Barrow, who didn't neglect the people of the URR, but rather considered them.
We, the people of URR, we are definitely very much thankful to this present government, because definitely they have created a lot of development to our side, especially these road constructions, which is a very, very paramount thing. It's very important to the people of that area. You know, we can talk about a lot of benefits that the road network has brought to the people of URR.
He said, Basse-Yorobawol Road will not only help Woolies, but entire URR, especially Wuli and Sanduk, while indicating that URR will never let President Barrow down and will continue to pray for him to emerge victorious in the upcoming election. It could be recalled in November 2019, President Adama Barrow laid the foundation stone for the construction of the road which connects Yorobawol and Basse. The 13-kilometer road will link the district of Wuli in Upper River region north through the Basse-Wuli Bridge under construction to the southern part of the region. However, Drame went on to talk about the benefits of constructing this road, as it will help improve the agricultural system, as women who harvest their food and lack storage facilities can easily take their food items to sell them to various markets without complications. He also talked about the difficulties they face in their hospitals.
From that end, going to the main hospital at Bansang or Basse, sometimes it takes you, a lot of hours before you reach. And having with that sick person, at least you need to reach earlier to take care of the sick person. So all those burden has gone. A lot of things also, like women, you have your garden materials that you harvest, you wanted to take them to the other side, to purchase them, to sell them. Also you have that difficulties, you take them for days, there's no proper storage system, all be spoiled. So all those things, and you can count a lot of things, all those things has gone. So they were all burden to us. Yeah.
After being neglected and sidelined by previous governments since independence, the region is witnessing a major infrastructural facelift as part of the government's effort to revitalize the regional economy. He further went on to advise the people of URR, especially the drivers, to run at low speed to avoid accidents and spoiling the road. If all hands are on deck, then together they can build a better nation. According to the contractors, the Basse-Yorobawol Road is expected to be completed in 3 months' time with standard roads, as roads are among the most important assets in any country, and keeping them in good working condition is obviously critical. For Star TV News, I am Mati Senghor.
The former national team player Ibu Silla stressed that none of the Gambia Football Federation executive members knows football more than him. The former Gambian player was speaking on Star TV Sports Bantaba on Saturday. Mati Senghor has rest of the details.
Ibu Silla, a former Gambian player born 12th April 1980 and a native of Bakau, started his playing career with his school team, BS, then to St. Mati, where he played 2 seasons before moving to Real de Banjul, where he didn't even spend 6 months before traveling to Belgium. Silla lamented that Gambia is not celebrating their former players, which is really not helping. He said that none of the members of GFF was a former player of the national team, which should not be, because the former national team members have been sidelined and they are the people that should guide the boys because they have experience and should be part of the national team setting. He further went on to say that he has never been contacted to have a say in the present team setting, but because of the love he has for his country, he would like to be one person that will guide the boys to make it when they have a game. He also said that the GFF is wasting resources because they do not have a clue about football, and this is what is affecting the national team. They should put the right people in the right place. He said as a professional, he will advise the GFF to make a rational decision before choosing players to bring them to the national team. Silla, with dribbling skills, passing accuracy, tactical knowledge, strength and power with the love for the game and experience in the field, explains that he learns about his selection in the national team through the radio and played 2 to 3 matches before going to Belgium. Ibu also talked about the game between Gambia and Senegal, where he was the captain, and according to him, the game caused commotion because they faced a lot of difficulties during that game as Senegalese did a lot of things just to make them give up, but they didn't. Reporting for Star TV News, I am Mati Senghor.
The Independent Electoral Commission voters registration plans are hindered due to COVID-19, revealed Joseph Colley, communication officer at the IEC. He made this remark while speaking to Star TV today. Our reporter Maria Madam interviewed him, and she now files in this report.
As the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted many sectors in the country, the Independent Electoral Commission is not an exception. The IEC's communication officer, Joseph Colley, reveals that the pandemic has hindered their plans towards the coming 2021 election in terms of voters' registration, as they were supposed to begin work since May 28 for the general public to have voters' card, but due to the state of emergency declared in the country, they are working on ways forward.
We also had planned to have a voter registration, general voter registration, and then of course this will enable voters to participate in the referendum, the impending referendum before the presidential elections. As you can see, because of the COVID, we should have started on the 28th of May for the general registration of voters. But because of the COVID, we can no longer hold it now. So plans are on the way. At the moment, we are working on a different scenario in case we continue to live with the pandemic.
He also mentioned that they are working on a second budget that will cover preventive materials for the workers, which is yet to be presented to government to continue their working process during the pandemic.
And of course, we have to move on with our plans. So we are preparing a budget which will include materials that we will need for the prevention of COVID-19. So this is contrary to what was reported in the papers because more specifically the point, because the journalist came and I had an interview with him, and then I told him we have not yet presented, the new budget. We are still working on it so that we can present it to government as an alternative to the previous one that we presented. So as of now, that is where we are. And then we're also working on the timelines. What I mean by timelines, because the law gives us according to the electoral law, at least 1 year we should come up with an electoral calendar.
Colley also noted that they will give out a date as when registration shall commence if the state of emergency is uplifted. So
we will know exactly what we'll obtain in Gambia, and then from then on we will take it up from there to give definitive dates as to when the general registration will be. The referendum, we cannot give a date. We can just speculate because, it's going into Parliament maybe in September, August, September. But maybe tentatively, even at that, I can say we can tentatively give a date as to when we're going to conduct it. That depends on when we want to conduct the general registration. Now we're saying general registration because although we have a register, that's a current register from 2011, and then 2016 we had the supplementary. But we want to enfranchise everybody.
Mr. Colley further added that they believe a lot of young people have turned to 18 from 2016 to date who should be given the opportunity to vote and take part in the referendum, while as the returnees too, whom does not have registers. 50% of registered voters should vote to make the referendum valid, and 75% of the voters should say yes to pass it, he added. Maria Madem, reporting for Star TV News.
Gambian journalists will now have their news content either in publication or broadcast platform regulated by an independent self-regulatory body set up by the Gambia Press Union GPU over ethical compromises. Jacqueline Colley files in this report.
The Media Council of the Gambia is tasked with receiving complaints from aggrieved people of any media report and attributes between them and the author or respective media houses without involving the court system. The decision of the Council will rely on the Media Code of Ethics launched by the GPU. The Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union, Sekou Jammeh, said the Media Council was launched in 2018 and the main objective was to promote and enhance the freedom of the press, which is the most important thing that triggered the motive of creating the Council. Mr. Jammeh highlighted that the Council has a governing body with 11 members who are not members of the GPU, but are from different stakeholders that have interest in the media. The members are from the Ministry of Information, GCCI, Tango, the Gambia Bar Association, the Federation of the Physically Disabled, and other private sectors. Jammeh stressed that under the governing body, there is an ethics committee with 3 members consisting of a lawyer, a practicing journalist who is a veteran journalist, and an independent person. For these positions, they nominated Amejuv Kaur, who is a veteran journalist not attached to any media house, Saliu Tal, the president of the Gambia Bar Association, and Madu Jabate as the independent member of the Ethics Committee under the Media Council. Mr. Jammeh stressed that the media practitioners should see the Media Council as a separate body from the Gambia Press Union and not intertwine both regulatory bodies, even though they should work closely, but the Council is an independent body, adding that the Media Council is the bridge between the media and the state, and the media serves as a watchdog and holds the government accountable to its people. So it will not be appropriate for the government to regulate the media. Therefore, they need to establish the Media Council, which is a self-regulatory body for the affairs of the media, and every media house should embrace it. He finally elaborated that the freedom of the press is not only for the media to enjoy, but also for the public to be able to lodge complaints about practitioners of the media houses, which will be resolved in a very easy and legal way. The CEO of Paradise TV and Radio, Haruna Drame, who seemed to be in line with the establishment of the Media Council, said the media has not been a priority before in the Gambia, but they have now realized the value that professionalism and ethics will play in media organization and establishing a flourishing media industry.
It is really important that we give value where value is due by doing quality work, by also valuing and ensuring professionalism in the delivery of our work. So the Media Council for me and its formation is an advancement of the ideals that we journalists and media practitioners stand for, and I support it.
Drame stressed that in the last government, there was no cohesion in the media industry and an organized setup. Even though the Gambia Press Union was existing, it was not empowered.
Yes, there was the Gambia Press Union, but the Gambia Press Union itself wasn't as empowered. And therefore, there's a lot of laws that were made that were against the principles of freedom of speech, the principles of being able to practice our profession without hindrance and or the state hoovering over us and thwarting our efforts. For me, the establishment of the Media Council is to start to do mechanisms internally between us media persons, and therefore help the state in effect to understand what our profession is all about, but also that the state will not be legislating laws that will be against the ideals of media freedom, that we ourselves will start to censor within ourselves and be able to establish standards that were professional and will be acceptable internationally. And in that vein, we are helping against bad laws that the government may be intending to make, and make our industry and our sector work very effectively.
He revealed that there was a broad consultation with some media personnel who have been with the media for several years and have delivered ideas on various issues.
As far as I'm aware, there has been broad consultation. Some of us who have been in media for several years have been consulted, have sat down, have delivered on our ideas. We've looked at best practices around the world, what prevails in other democracies in the sub-region, in Africa, and globally. What is the ideal situation? But we have to also give this context and background. What is the background? The background is in fact that we had a dictatorship that has hated the media so much and has created laws that really has set the media backward. To correct that, what do we need to do? So the Media Council and other efforts that have been made by the Gambia Press Union and independent media as well has been in that direction of creating a playing field where media persons will not be afraid to report facts, will not be afraid to investigate, and will know that if they do the right job, they can go home and sleep with their families and nobody is taking anybody to mile 2. So you have to understand and put it in the right context to understand that the Media Council therefore is in the right direction to protect every media house, to protect every person who holds a microphone across this country.
Jacqueline Coley reporting for Star TV News.
And now, news beyond our borders. Tobacco is crucial for Zimbabwe's economy. It brings in foreign currency, which helps with cash and fuel shortages. But COVID-19 is making that more difficult. Al Jazeera's Haru Mutasa reports from the farming village of Beatrice.
Julius Mutatariki isn't having much luck with his tobacco. After more than 15 years of farming, he's only managed to grow 1 hectare this season. He blames years of drought and now the coronavirus pandemic that's led to lockdowns and travel restrictions.
We can only send one person to the auction floors to sell for us. Even if we are not happy with the price, we can't argue with him because we were not there to negotiate prices for ourselves.
Tobacco is Zimbabwe's second biggest foreign currency earner after gold. Last year, the country earned nearly $800 million exporting mainly to China and Europe. Now, because of COVID-19, international buyers can no longer get here. Many small-scale black tobacco growers acquired land seized from white commercial farmers 2 decades ago. It was part of the government's controversial land redistribution program.
Before its controversial land reform about 20 years ago, Zimbabwe had roughly 2,000 commercial farmers growing tobacco. Now there are tens of thousands of them, but most are small-scale farmers, some planting as little as half a hectare.
Zimbabwe was already in an economic crisis long before the pandemic. Its debt arrears means the government can't borrow enough money from foreign lenders for a bailout. Many of those lenders lack confidence in the political leadership.
People would rather bring equipment to Zimbabwe knowing that, at least with equipment it can get to the people. That's the major challenge. So it's an issue of confidence. Are we confident enough that giving the Mnangagwa government money, that money will be utilized for what it is meant for? That is where the big question mark is.
About 300,000 farmers are stockpiling their tobacco until global lockdowns end and international travel resumes. They say only then might they be able to salvage something this season. Haru Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Beatrice, Zimbabwe.
Crowds have been out across the Netherlands as bars, restaurants, museums and theaters were allowed to open. The number of new infections has dropped steadily in recent weeks there, but businesses have been told to enforce strict social distancing rules. Al Jazeera's Step Version reports from Amsterdam.
Keeping a distance while having an intimate dinner. This restaurant came up with a solution of these glass houses. People sharing a household are allowed to dine out together for the first time in 2 months. Despite the strict rules of only 30 people in a restaurant and 1.5 meters between the tables, many in the Netherlands could not wait to socialize. In Amsterdam's famous shopping district, the security guards are struggling to keep shoppers 1.5 meters apart. As soon as the shops reopened, the center was flooded with people as if the coronavirus pandemic was already forgotten.
It is complicated. People are overtaking or walking fast or suddenly stand still. We need to adjust to this new reality. It's a challenge, but we will get there. It will need some time and we need to do this together.
With the relatively high number of nearly 6,000 reported COVID-19 deaths, the government has been blamed for being too lenient. Most markets like this one have remained open after a so-called intelligent lockdown was enforced.
The Dutch have chosen to have a 1.5 meters distance between each other because that's the equivalent of 2 arm lengths and easy to remember. But with markets and other public places becoming busier, those who belong to high-risk groups are even more scared to go outside.
Mira Thompson is forced to stay in isolation until a vaccine is found because of her weak lungs. The singer lost most of her income. Now she can't perform. She says the government has created a divide within society.
The more freedom others have, the less we have it. And it's quite strange because the risk group, if you want to call it that, has been left out already. So it's actually the divide is becoming, the division is becoming more and more.
While masks are now mandatory on public transport, the government has officially discouraged people from wearing them anywhere else. Health activists say this proves that the government still aims to achieve the so-called herd immunity by letting the virus spread.
If those possibilities have not been fully exhausted, I don't see why choosing mitigation can be seen as anything other than an utter failure to protect the people you're morally and legally obligated to protect, and even to the point of considering it a crime against humanity even.
The government was not available to comment on the allegations. Looking at busy parks at its first day of renewed freedom, worries about a second wave of infections seem far away. Step Vassen, Al Jazeera, Amsterdam.
Journalists covering the U.S. protests over the death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man in police custody, have increasingly come under attack by police officers, even after clearly identifying themselves. UN Special Rapporteur Agents Command said U.S. police action towards protesters and the media involved possible violation of international law. The Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press called the targeting of journalists reprehensible and clear violation of the First Amendment. Al Jazeera, Charity Bellis reports.
This was Saturday in Minneapolis. Reuters journalists were filming protesters just after a curfew came into effect. Two of the crew were shot by the bullets, despite wearing press passes, a vest marked with press, and holding a TV camera. They sustained injuries to their arms, neck, and face. A day earlier in Minneapolis, a CNN reporter was handcuffed while broadcasting live.
You're under arrest. Okay. Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir? Why am I under arrest, sir?
His crew was also arrested. And there was this from an LA Times reporter.
I had my notebook in my hand when the Minnesota State Patrol was advancing on protesters and us. We identified ourselves as press, and they fired tear gas canisters on us at point-blank range.
But the assault on journalists didn't stop at Minneapolis. As protests spread, so did incidents of police assaults and detentions from Oakland to outside the White House, where a BBC cameraman was hit while filming. The Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press called the targeting of journalists reprehensible and clear violations of the First Amendment.
Journalists are the eyes and ears. It was built into the U.S. Constitution that the journalists would be a checks and balance on not only government, but institutions of government as well, including the police.
Press! Press!
UN Special Rapporteur Agnes Callamard said US police actions towards protesters and the media involve possible violations of international law.
I am press. Please.
There's a bit of impunity that journalists are impeding the police's ability to do their job, not understanding that the press has an important role.
As evidenced here in Louisville, Kentucky.
Time here.
Are you okay?
I'm getting shot! I'm getting...
Katie, are you okay?
Rubber bullets, it's okay. It's those pepper bullets. It's those pepper bullets.
Who are they aiming that at?
Nice shooting at the photographer.
At us, like directly at us.
Why are they doing that?
In a healthy democracy, journalists hold power accountable. Those people, that function, and the US Constitution looking increasingly vulnerable. Charlotte Bellis, Al Jazeera.
And before we end the news, a recap of our main headlines. The economy was in a better shape during Jammeh's era, says former Secretary General Mamadou Sabali. None of the GFF executive members knows football more than me, claims former captain Ibu Silla. Media Council of the Gambia to hold Gambian journalists accountable. On the international scene, biggest foreign currency earner hit by COVID-19. Netherlands reopened with strict social distancing rules. Press freedom violation reported at US protests. That's all for this edition of the news. Please enjoy the rest of our programs and join us tomorrow for more news. Thank you.